I can't believe Britney Spears has so many unreleased songs.
I know it's kind of crazy. And they're on YouTube, so you
Yeah.
can go there and find them. If you like to dance, it's definitely,
Particular the Blackout
yeah,
era,
yeah.
Britney Spears.
Look for Pull Out. It's explicit, but it is a great dance song. Again, we want to encourage you all to dance at least once a day, 30 minutes. Jump in your bathroom, jump in your garage, wherever they have some good acoustics. Yeah, acoustics. And blare the music and just
Yeah.
dance around like a fool.
Yeah, we don't know how to dance, obviously, and you don't have to learn how to dance. You don't need to dance any type of way. Just move your body and
There are many clinical evidence-based benefits to dancing. It can reduce anxiety, stress, can make you feel happier, can refocus your brain
wow.
and trigger your brain to think more positively. So
Wow.
dance it up, right?
If the doctor says that, it's true.
Doctor's orders.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, Father's Day is coming up.
Right.
I thought it'd be a great idea to dive into a very complicated, complex, and individualistic
Yes.
sort of
Topic.
Everyone has a different approach to what fatherhood looks like for them. They have a different experience of what their father was like in their life.
Yes.
I think when you're queer, LGBTQ plus, you kind of have a unique experience because sometimes that relationship between you and your father is under a microscope.
Yeah.
There's a lot of myths and stigma that if you have a poor relationship with your dad, it can cause you to be gay or have a
Yeah.
change in your sexuality, which there's no clinical evidence or scientific research that proves that. Many
Right.
straight people have poor relationships with their fathers. Many gay men have great relationships with their fathers. But for me, I had a complicated relationship with my dad. I know you had a complicated relationship with your
Very
dad as
similar, yeah.
well. And so thought we would dive
Dive
into that
in.
for the holiday.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this topic. Something we talked a little bit
Sure.
in the past videos, but not really. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and that's what this podcast is, always sort of compounding on things we've already talked about before. We'll bring topics up again. I'm sure we'll revisit fatherhood and the relationship with our dads at some point in
Yeah.
a future episode.
Yeah, stick around.
Stick
We'll
around.
definitely talk about this again in the future. But what are the questions that you got for us?
Well, first of all, I wanted to know about what your relationship was like with your dad between the ages of like 2 and 7.
Yeah.
So like those really early years when we start being able to realize what's going
Understand
on.
things,
Yeah,
yeah.
make memories.
I feel like my relationship with my dad until I was 4 or 5 was really good. We were very close. It was not until my sister was
Mhm.
born, my little
Tachi.
Tachi, all the eyes were,
I mean, she's the princess. All the eyes are going to be on her, of course.
well, as a kid, you feel left out, you feel ignored by your parents.
Right.
Not as much as my mom. My mom, she knew that, so she always tried to compensate a little bit, and that's why my sisters, to this day, they say I'm the favorite.
Yeah.
But that's how I felt at 5. I felt left out. I felt ignored by
Right.
my dad. Our relationship changed from that point on because he would now have all eyes for her. He would play with her. And I, being the older brother, would have to help them taking care of her, right? Playing with her. So I felt almost an adult
Yeah.
in their eyes.
For sure. And they had you pretty young, right? I
Yes.
mean, they got married young as well. And so by the time, what is it, 5 years? Yeah, 5 years later,
years.
Tachi comes along. They're at different places in their lives. They're wanting to be maybe more focused on being parents. They've figured out some things maybe they wish they did better with you. And
Yeah.
now it's like, this is our times. And we have a third person who can help us. We have Gabriel. He can be an adult now, and we can put a
Yeah.
lot of our responsibility on him. But at 5, you're not quite ready for that.
No, it's a big trauma for you because you had your parents, they love you, they spent all this time with you, and then you have someone else that you're sharing time with, and
Yes.
then you feel that you lost something, you lost a connection. And at such early age of my childhood, I felt like there was something missing, especially my relationship with my dad.
It's like a break in the
Yes.
relationship. What's interesting too is when you are like me, and I know like you, a little queer, we want to be the princess sometimes,
Yes.
especially when you're 5. And so to see your sister come behind you and get to kind of fulfill all those sort of goals or dreams you have for yourself, like getting all the attention, being the princess, getting to wear pink, getting
Not
to
only
be
that,
frilly.
she would get Barbies for Christmas,
Yes.
dresses, makeup as a kid, and
Right.
I would get toys that were not as fun
Right.
for a guy. And I remember having this little feeling of jealous
Yeah.
for her being a girl, for her having the best treatment from my parents because she was the youngest.
Right.
So I had all these feelings in my head growing up, being
Mm-hmm.
left out, ignored, and a little jealous
Yep.
of not being the spoiled kid.
Yeah, would imagine kind of the same area for me at 5, 6, 7, 8. You start wanting to explore a little bit of those more feminine toys, a little bit of that sort of idea, and it's strongly discouraged. But then to have a sister and see her so encouraged to try on the slippers and the little high heels and the jewelry and the little fake things that, look like a princess, and you're
Yes,
like, over here, the Joker, like watching it
yes,
go down
literally.
and really being ashamed and pushed away from those types of things too, which probably if you're like me, as you're gravitating towards them, your dad was probably like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Did you ever experience any of that?
I remember I would play with Barbies very often because I
Mm.
had to play with my little sister, so it was a great opportunity for me to play with the dolls, right?
The
And
dolls.
sometimes I would just play too much, sometimes even more than her. I
Yep.
remember I was already growing up, maybe 10, 11, 12. I was still playing with her because she was a kid, right? She needed a companion, someone to play with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my parents, probably my dad, he made a comment or say something about that I couldn't be playing with the Barbies anymore. It was
Yeah.
not boy stuff.
Right. I had a similar situation. My grandma used to babysit a bunch of kids when I was growing up, and she'd babysit me as well before I started school. Or if it was the summertime, I'd come there too. And I had two cousins who were around my age, both female. They had lots of Barbies, and they would leave them at my grandma's house and all the toys. And so I'd get to go over and stay at my grandma's and play with all the girl stuff. I would prefer it alone, like when my
Yeah.
cousins weren't there, so I could just have all the toys to myself
Wow.
and really kind of get to immerse in the situation. Again, one of my cousins was like a couple years older than me, and so when she would see me playing with girl stuff, she'd make me feel bad about it. And so my dream was to go to grandma's house, play with those toys. And what's funny is she never really made me feel bad about it. She never necessarily encouraged it, but I do remember sometimes I'd go to Walmart or something like that and be like, "Oh, the kids would love this Barbie. You should get it
Uh,
for." And she'd be like, "Okay," and she'd kind of let me pick out some girl
that's
gendered
nice.
stuff, which is so interesting because she's quite conservative, but she really kind of let me be myself, which is nice looking back. Did you ever get to buy any like more female gender type toys or
No, all
no?
my female gender toys were
With sisters.
my sister's toys,
Yeah.
but I did play with all of them, and I was always very excited for Christmas because my sister would get all the Barbies, and
Yes.
obviously I would get to play with them.
Yes.
What about your relationship with your dad? How was your relationship with him?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my mom and dad got divorced when I was about 2, and so I really stopped seeing him at this time. They had a really rough relationship, and so they decided to separate and part ways. And I would occasionally have plans to see my dad, like on the weekends, maybe like once a month. This really it came into my memory probably around 5 to 7. There's like a water park nearby and or the beach, and he'd say, "Oh, we'll go to the water park on Saturday." And this is really sad, and I don't mean to call my dad out for this because we are a little bit better terms now. But on the weekends when he would say he would come, I would like sit outside and wait and like look for the car to come by, and he would
Wow.
never come. And there weren't cell phones at this time, or at least he didn't have one. And so sometimes he just wouldn't show up and
Wow.
wouldn't even explain that he wasn't coming. And so I had this huge fear of abandonment or getting
Wow.
left behind or forgotten, and that really festered with me. And my mom says I would cry and cry and cry, and I don't remember really too much. I have like this one flashcard image, is what I call it. It's like this image of me sitting on my grandma's stairs outside of her house, waiting for them to pick me up. But I don't know if it's a
Wow.
real
Yeah.
memory.
But it's funny because that was a trauma for you in your
Yes,
head, and very similar to me, it became part of our lives.
yes.
And we don't even remember exactly what happened and how
Hmm.
was it, but we remember there was a trauma for us as a kids to feel that way, feel abandoned.
Yeah, it's interesting because that abandonment certainly led to me not trust my family as much. I
Um,
remember not being able to take their word as solid, and me also learning that I could lie to them too. I didn't have to
right,
fulfill my obligations to my family because they weren't fulfilling it to me.
right.
At 5, that's kind of a lot to handle and to
Yeah.
understand, and it starts to really affect how you act around people around you too. I felt like my dad was constantly not telling me the truth and having no
Yeah.
consequences for it. So I feel like that's where I started having similar behaviors, realizing that I didn't have to fulfill the commitments or tell the truth to the people around me at an early age, which then facilitates into being gay and having to
Yeah.
hide a lot of
Exactly.
those things. And so a lot of that, I think could be stemmed back to that abandonment issue. I go back to the Barbies because one of my favorite things to do with a Barbie, I'd have her have a car and she would live in the car. She put all of her stuff in her
Wow.
car and she would drive around and she could live anywhere, prop up her stuff in the playroom. When she wanted to move, she could put in everything she had in her car and leave. And I almost felt like it was a way that I couldn't be abandoned or I
Right.
couldn't be too settled somewhere. I could always move
Interesting.
around and always have freedom. And as a kid, I still see that in myself. Like I always want to feel free. I always want to feel like I can get up and go and do what I want to do. And I wonder what that is and what kind of, triggered that. But I do feel like my major trauma between that time with my dad was that sort of abandonment feeling.
It's almost like you were trying to escape your reality and you
Yeah.
play with the Barbie and
Yeah. And she was always
go.
single. She didn't need no
Ah,
man. She didn't need nobody. She'd have kids sometimes. She'd have pets. She'd have
wow.
lots of stuff to jam into her Barbie
And always
vehicle.
traveling.
She's always traveling. She's always moving around. And that's kind of funny because that's still part of me a little
Right.
bit. So, of course, early in life, we have these traumatic situations with our parents. They happen even in the most perfect of circumstances. We want to know why sometimes, right? Like what caused them to act that way. And I often think maybe it was my dad's relationship with his dad, which
Right.
was quite
Yeah.
complicated too. And I only know a very sliver, piece of it. And I shouldn't speak on it as if I do, but I'll tell you what I know. But what was your dad's relationship like with his dad? Do you know much
I
about it?
don't know much about it. My grandpa, he passed away very early 2000s. I remember I was around 3, 4, so I don't remember much about my grandpa.
Hmm.
I do remember they had a good relationship. I don't know much about how was their relationship when he was growing up, but I think the biggest reason for my dad to have a distant relationship with me was the fact that he was very young and he didn't know how to raise a kid and he was just
Hmm.
very immature. And I just feel like it was timing for him because later on, and we'll get into this later, I feel like it was later on that we got to reconnect
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, and that's good. I think that for the majority of people out there, I hope they get to reconnect with their dad at some point, especially if they had a rocky road in the beginning. I look at my dad's relationship with his dad, and again, I don't know much about it, but I do know that my dad's dad was not around very
Yeah.
often. He was in the military and worked a lot and enjoyed working, so he spent a lot of time
Mhm.
making himself busy. And my dad's an only child, so he didn't have a lot of home, relationships to
Mhm.
keep him there, to
He
keep
was
him
never
invested.
present.
Yeah, and so my dad was always like on the go. He liked to
Hmm.
hang out with his friends. He was always kind of out of the house and not really seeing his dad very much. At least that's what I was told.
So for your dad, having that kind of relationship was
It
normal.
was normal, exactly. And my dad had me quite late. He was 32,
Mhm.
so you would kind of expect him to be a little more mature, but we mature differently. And I don't think he really understood what was going to be necessary to raise a kid. But also, I think looking back, the relationship between him and my mom, when it fractured, it also kind of fractured with me. Like, I think
Right.
maybe there was some resentment. Like, I
Hmm.
reminded him of my mom,
Right,
but
because they divorced and you were living with your mom, so you had
yes,
all those feelings,
yes.
like almost like you were defending her
Right. And that I definitely always felt like that. I always felt like I was on my mom's defense
side.
until I got a little bit older and we started having a rocky situation occur as well. But, I think I don't want to put a lot of blame on him, and that's definitely not what this talk is about. It's more trying to understand how we review and
Yeah.
sort of piece together our complicated relationships with family members. But then we sort of move into that next age range, we're like preteen. How
Hmm.
does your relationship with your dad change at that point?
So I remember at that point, my relationship with my dad and my parents in general kind of like shifted a little bit because I was now a teenager. I was
Right.
now a little older. So, and obviously, I knew for sure that I was queer. I knew for sure that I was different and I had many secrets. So, I didn't talk to my dad very much about anything that was going on with me. I never talked to him about my hormones. I never talked to him about my body hair,
Right.
any of this stuff. I never asked him about masturbation or nothing at all because I just didn't have a connection with him and I
Hmm.
was also very shy about my body,
Hmm.
on top of being gay, on top of hiding all those secrets.
Yep.
So I felt like that was a very dark time for me when it comes to my relationship with my dad in particular,
Hmm.
because for him, it was almost like he was different from me because straight male, I'm gay, young kid who's not really sure about anything. So I don't want to talk to my dad about
No.
not being sure and being maybe gay. So I was very scared for even for him to know that I was thinking that I was gay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have never at that age even thought to bring up the possibility that I could be different. You
Yeah.
know, if anything, I wanted to stay as under the radar as possible with my family. Of course, I had this time had already been involved with church, had known that my sexuality is not something you got to talk about and you're going to pray it away. It's going to be fixed by the time you're 18. Don't worry, you just got to do a lot of prayer and life change and you'll get
Yeah.
it figured out.
You get it figured out for
But so
sure.
I didn't want to bring that up, certainly to my dad. But at this time, actually, my dad had gotten remarried. I was spending more time with him, like maybe a couple weekends out of the month. And his new wife, my stepmom, wanted to seem to want to be more involved, seemed to want to spend more time with me, and that was great. Again, they were really heavily involved with church, and so a lot of times I would just get really conflicted about going through puberty and
Mm-hmm.
who do I talk to, and realize that I just didn't have anyone to talk to. And I
Right.
wonder out there how many kids are in a similar situation where they just don't even want to talk to their dad or a male figure in their life because it can be so traumatic for the result, right? It's almost like you're pre-setting the trauma.
Yeah.
So you're like, I'm not even going to go down that route.
It's almost like he's the last person that I want to talk to.
Exactly.
Is if there is a line of people, he's the last person that I want to
Right.
confide my feelings and
Yes.
my thoughts because I don't want to be discovered by my dad.
Yeah, and even more so, imagine you come to your dad, you're finally in this vulnerable situation. It's taken you months to prepare. You're like, I need to talk to you. And then you get shot down or
Yep.
you get like a crazy response, which back in the day was the general, right?
Hmm.
You might get put into therapy. You might get put into a
Yeah.
conversion camp. You might get kicked out of the
It's a
house.
risk.
It's a risk, right? And so I was not playing risk with my
Hmm.
life, especially at that phase. I knew I needed to figure my own stuff out and come back to the situation. But things did get a little bit better for us, and I got really again involved in church, which had its pluses and its minuses. But I was able to see him a lot more. The crazy thing is, even though I was seeing him a lot more often, our relationship never got closer. It's
Mm.
almost like I've always had this like uncle that was
Uh-huh.
around. I feel like our relationship is very much that. There's this like barrier. We don't talk about personal issues. Even to this day, we don't really get to that father-son nitty-gritty connection. It's always just like, oh, he's like that other guy in my family. And I do wonder how many, especially gay guys out there have a similar situation with their dads and how it's kind of affected them growing up, especially when we think about in the future. And there's so much to talk about in this episode, and I do really want to talk about our position on fatherhood and how we want to maybe consider that in the future and some of our hesitations. So specifically for me, my main hesitation is that you have a child who is so different than you
Yeah.
and you can't connect with them. And especially when you're queer or LGBTQ plus, having a baby is more like a investment, right? You spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time, you get to kind of prepare and plan, but imagine putting all this work
It's a
in
risk. You don't
and
know if you're gonna have a great relationship with your kid. You don't know
mhm,
how is it gonna be. It's definitely something that you need to be prepared,
yeah,
I think, in my opinion, because you have to have some sort of
game plan.
yes.
And even knowing your game plan, you have to understand that there are so many outliers that your plan is probably not going to happen. And it helps that we have people like your mom who are
Yeah.
incredible and I think would really support us if we decided to have a family. But main thing is I would want to be 100% committed to having children and really foster our relationship and really be that like this is my job, this is my passion. I'm a parent now
Yeah.
because I come from a family where my dad wasn't the best. His dad wasn't the best. I think his dad probably wasn't the best. So I feel like I'm in this genetic tree of like bad dads. And I don't mean that specifically about my dad. I think if he was fairly looking at his career as a father with me, he would agree that he wasn't the best dad. But that does weigh on me. Like, am I genetically predisposed to being a bad dad? You know? And so that's another major concern that I have. Do you have any fears about being a dad?
I feel like fear is a very intense word, but definitely some hesitation. of having a child because I feel like I want to be prepared. I feel like I want to give my best. I want to
Mhm.
be an example to them. I want them to have what I didn't have in the past. I want them to
Mhm.
have a dad who is present, who is acceptable, who is maybe a best dad ever. But I know in reality, those things are different because life is difficult. Some people are busy. Some people cannot give them 100% of their lives to their kids. There's work, there is
Other
other
obligations.
obligations in
Right.
general. And we'll never have this opportunity to have a perfect
Right.
scenario to have a child. There's
Mhm.
always things that happen
There's always
career
going to be
wise.
something.
Yes,
Right.
but I do want to feel prepared, ready.
Yeah, and I've talked to people about this who are parents, and some of them, again, when you're LGBTQ plus, you can kind of start the process when you're ready. And so even the people that have had, children successfully, they're always like, you're never going to be 100% ready. There's always going to be things going on, and it's always going to be a difficult sort of process, and life happens. And I do think that that's fine. It's more so I just want to make sure that I can really dedicate all of my time
Yes.
and all of my main focus on being a parent. And right now, that is just not possible. I mean, we live in such a crazy world. And even now, I think about how much progress has been laid for
Yeah.
having families if you're gay or in a queer relationship. But there are still pushbacks. And we live in Florida. I'm concerned that my kids would get bullied, at least
Yeah.
living here. So we'd have to consider maybe relocating and all those little details. But something that I think is interesting about us is a lot of the things we like to do are very childlike. We
Yes.
have a big calling into Disney related
Yes.
type activities. We love going to Disney. We love the Disney cruise,
We love playing games. We love animation movies,
cartoons, a lot
cartoons.
of things that I think would be able to help us bridge into, especially
Yes.
that early childhood life, be able to have a lot of fun. And so that's when I have these sort of rose colored glasses
Yes.
on when I want to be a dad. As I'm like, we're at Disney. I'm like, oh my God, it'd be so cool to go on this ride with like kids. And I look at
Yes.
pictures of you when you're a kid and I'm like,
Uh,
you're so cute. I went like 6 little Gabriels running around.
can you imagine if we have three Tylers, three Gabriels,
It would be
or
crazy.
Gabrielas?
Hey, you never know. It could be some late. I mean, I would love to have daughters as well.
Yes.
And so I think it's just, trying to figure out what's going to be best for us. We get asked a lot of times, are you going to have kids one day? And sometimes it's a hard no, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's a maybe, and sometimes it's a can't wait to have kids. And it keeps swinging from direction to direction. I think the most important thing is that you just kind of let it come naturally to you. I know a lot of people our age are already thinking of having
Yeah.
families. And when they say that to us, I'm like, I just can't imagine having a kid right now. I'm 35
Yeah.
almost, but still, it just seems,
For some people, I think they prefer having a kid at young age
yeah,
because that way there's not a big gap of a difference
right.
between them and their kids. But at the same time, I feel like it's important to be prepared when the moment comes. Like you said, having a kid is almost like you get that childhood back.
Yeah.
You get to experience
Mm-hmm.
those times that were behind again,
Yes.
and you become a kid again. And I think that's obviously one of the incredible things of having kids
Yeah.
because you feel like you're a kid again because you get to see their perspective of the world. Unfortunately, they grow up, so maybe you need to consider having more
But
kids,
that's the thing
always having
too,
kids.
right? Like I want to really be able to enjoy their childhood.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes if you're too young and you have kids, you're so busy, you're running around, you can't, really hover. And maybe that's good for the kid. Looking back, I flourished on my own. I loved my independence, but looking back too, I wish I kind of had somebody to help me along
Right.
at least half the time. And so I think what's interesting about our relationship too is we already kind of act like kids. So when I feel like that is starting to fizzle and we're losing sort of our fire for life and our fire to still feel childlike and hold on to the youth part of our
Yeah.
personalities,
That's
I
the
think
right time to have
I
kids.
think having a kid might reignite that,
Yeah.
and so that's why I kind of want to wait, at least at this point, I say at least 5 to 10 more years because we're doing just fine at Disney on our own.
We do every ride, we get every toy,
Yes,
we play
yes.
video games all the time. So I feel like we're basically kids still,
Yeah, and
but
also I want to lay a foundation that maybe my parents didn't for me, and I want to talk about this in another episode in the future, how, for us, we don't have an inheritance. We don't have
yeah,
money from our family.
yeah,
We actually are the primary breadwinners
yes.
for the majority of our family, and
Hmm.
so we don't have anyone to fall back on. It's just us, and most of our family falls back on us. So having our own family, our own kids, just puts another weight on the fact that if something were to go wrong, we don't know where we would take them. Like we don't have a home base. We are
Yeah.
the home base, and so I want to make sure our home base is fortified
I do feel
before.
like we are already the parents,
That's a whole nother
at
episode.
least
Yes.
of our moms. We're gonna
Yes.
talk about this maybe Mother's Day. I guess we missed
Next
it.
year.
But definitely, I do feel like we have this feeling of being a parent
Yes.
already
Yes.
with our moms. So I feel
Mhm.
we kind of experience that. So our hands are full already with them,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
plenty, and we love it.
Well, we love it. It's just like you said, I feel like our plate is full right now, but sometimes the plate gets bigger, sometimes the plate loses some of the meat on it. And so whenever our plate, I think, starts to look more ready for a couple extra heads at the table,
Yes.
we'll start pushing our minds in that direction. But for now, I'm happy it just being you and me.
However, we're considering maybe a cat.
Katie.
Yes,
That would
because if you
be
don't know, we are obsessed with cats.
true.
We had cats in the past. I did. You had.
Mm.
But we never had a cat together. And I feel like that will be the first step before having kids. If we can take care of cats,
Yes.
we can take care.
The funny
Maybe.
parallel of that is the reason we haven't gotten a cat yet is because I again want to be like a full-time hands-on
Yes.
cat dad. Whereas in the
Yes.
past I've had cats and we've kind of like gone and left them at home and not been super attentive. And I think that reflects the relationship I've had with my cats. And I want to be like the supreme cat dad for this next journey when we decide to embark on it. So if you have any tips on how to train and foster a beautiful relationship with a kitty, leave them in the comments below.
Yes, because we do want to have a cat and we want to maybe bring the cat with us
Yeah, can you
on
travel with a cat?
maybe road trips with the cat because we love road trips and we want to bring the cat and we don't want to leave the cat at home or leave the cat for our moms to take care of the cat. We don't want to be our parents, okay? We want to
Yes.
have a full relationship with our cats.
Exactly. So maybe next time this conversation comes around next year, maybe we'll revisit fatherhood during this
Yes.
week and we'll have a cat and we can talk about our cat fatherhood journey. But until then, I think that's the next step in our family expansion. What do you think?
Yeah, stick around. We are still considering, we're still seeing if this is going to be
Right for
possible.
us.
Yeah.
Exactly. But until then, we get to expand our family through YouTube and have you all join us talking about some random stuff here and there. But again, fatherhood is such a big dialogue, big conversation. And to just touch on it here and there, I think is the most healthy way so we don't overwhelm you or overwhelm ourselves with the trauma.
Yeah. We have
And
another
revisiting.
1,000 stories that we would
Yes.
love to share, but unfortunately,
For now, we'll cap it at
Yeah.
preteens and we'll talk about how our fatherhood experience continues in another episode. But we're so happy that we had you join us on this video or this audio. If you're listening, we are always excited to share our experience. Of course, I always think back to young Tyler and what I want him to know and want him to not feel so alone. And so hopefully this video forms a family. That's the goal, is creating a family here on YouTube. But if you haven't already with this video,
please subscribe our channel, like the video, share if you want, comment. Please tell us your story. Tell us your
Yes.
experience of fatherhood. Do you have kids? Maybe we have people who have
I
a lot
would
of
love
kids
to hear that.
and maybe they have some recommendation
Or their
tips.
journey of how they adopted or had a surrogate. People in the previous videos have commented their experience growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s now. And it really touches me. It makes a huge impact listening to your story. Again, this is about community building. So I hope we get to hear from you and hear more stories again in those comments below. But we look forward to seeing you next week on
Thanks
another
for
episode.
watching. Thanks for
being
listening. Thanks for
here.
being here. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being amazing.
You. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
What would be the name of our cat?
Well, my previous cats' names were Whiskers, Gray Kitty, Baby Kitty. What were your cats' names?
I only have one cat,
Right.
and she's still alive, and she's 13 years old, and her name is Lori.
So we got Lodi and we have Whiskers. I really like the name of the cat.
That's what's going to be called, the cat.
I think that's the premiere. I mean, it's the cat. The with two E's.
There's only one cat.
Our cat. The cat.